But let's talk about schools. What are the key elements needed for a healthy building or a healthy school, and where should schools focus?
Yeah, so I like being the setup guy for the why we care on this, and I think here the science is really rich for several decades, and I think you could talk about the many aspects of how the building influences our health. We're not going to get into all of them, but we've written a report called "The Nine Foundations of a Healthy Building." Just to name a couple, we think about the basics: air quality, lighting and views, the acoustical performance, water quality, and the thermal conditions in the space. And for each of those, we have a dense body of science that links it into important health outcomes for both teachers and students and staff in the building, for everybody in the building. And we could think about the outcomes around things like immune system health or cardiovascular, heart health, and I think a lot about brain health or cognitive function. So I'm going to stick on brain health just for a second, because instead of going through all the literature, just give you a couple examples of the way the school building influences student performance through student and teacher cognitive function, and just take a couple of these elements of the built environment. So if we start from acoustics, here's an example of a study that I think is pretty impactful. It tells you the scale and scope of the impact. So just a study looking at 500 kids, 8 to 9-year-olds in a school, doing national standardized testing on math tests, found that there was a 5.5 point lower math scores on standardized tests for every 10 decibel increase. And we know some of these classrooms can be 50 decibels or higher. They should be down a lot lower. And so you're seeing that immediate translation. Of course, the signal ratio noise is lost. The teachers have a harder time teaching. The students have a hard time with the comprehension. And we see this in many other studies, relationships between acoustics and working memory and comprehension. And we see it show up in test scores. On the lighting and views and biophilic design, here's an example of a study my own team did at Harvard, where we show a link between creativity test scores and lighting and views, or the nature-inspired design in a building. So simple things like how much light is coming in, what's the type of environment around, the aesthetics of the space, actually influencing creativity. So cognitive performance, but on the creativity task side, and also reduces actually, or improves stress recovery. So very important for teachers in particular. And the last category I'll talk about just quickly is air quality. It's been a major focus of my work. And here the body of literature is just really deep. Again, as an example, one study, 150 classrooms, 2-year study following elementary school kids. They see slightly higher ventilation rates associated with almost a 3% increase in reading test scores, just from improving the ventilation rate, and not a lot, just even a little bit. Another study, 70 elementary schools, 140 classrooms, over 3,000 students. They improve the ventilation. What they see, an 11-point higher math test scores. Again, you can pull the pathways through the biological, brain function, cognitive function, and you see the impact on overall test scores. And Mark, here's the last point I'll make about this that's really interesting. Another study showed that the scale and scope of this problem, 90% of schools weren't even meeting the basic minimums. So we see these decrements in math and reading and cognitive function performance at the currently too low design level, and then 90% of schools aren't even meeting that. So that's just a taste of some of the evidence that's been accumulating for decades and accumulating in our kids and teacher performance. And we know the state of the schools is not up to where it needs to be from a public health standpoint.